On a blistering afternoon at the University of Maryland, a frustrated athlete yanked off his sweat-soaked cotton t-shirt and stared at it with a single burning thought: there has to be something better than this. That moment, sticky, uncomfortable, and utterly ordinary, would launch one of the most unexpected revolutions in sports. This isn't the story of a genius with a master plan. It's the story of an irritation that refused to be ignored, a question that demanded an answer, a spark that became a brand. So, what happened? This is how a frustrated athlete turned a sweat-soaked problem into the billion-dollar empire we know today as Under Armour. The problem no one else noticed. Before Kevin Plank ever founded a company, before he ever stitched a prototype, pitched a product, or dreamed of competing with Nike, he discovered something unsettling. During a routine football practice at the University of Maryland, he peeled off his cotton t-shirt and realized it weighed nearly 3 pounds from sweat. That small, uncomfortable detail, the weight of a soaked shirt, would eventually trigger one of the most unexpected revolutions in modern athletic apparel. Plank didn't know it that afternoon, but the frustration he felt tugging at that heavy shirt would become the first thread of a global empire. Under Armour was not born from market research, corporate strategy, or entrepreneurial mentorship. It began with a simple question from a tired, irritated athlete: why isn't there something better than this? The answer would change sports forever. Kevin didn't need market research to understand that he was not the only athlete who loathed the sports apparel options available at the time. After all, he was a football player himself, an undersized fullback at Maryland, with a reputation for stubbornness and an almost obsessive attention to discomfort. Teammates remember him as the guy who hated cotton t-shirts with a special kind of fury. Cotton clung, cotton dragged. Cotton turned an athlete into a sponge. And Plank's annoyance didn't fade after each practice. Instead, he brooded. He was convinced that somewhere, someone must have invented a better base layer, something lighter, faster drying, less suffocating in heat. Yet a search through equipment rooms, catalogs, and sporting goods stores revealed nothing new. The giants of the industry, Nike, Adidas, Reebok, were focused on shoes, branding, and short style changes. None had bothered to rethink the one garment every athlete wore closest to their skin. "I wanted to make the world's greatest football undershirt," Plank shared in an interview. "But I realized that no team sport had equipment for apparel. Apparel was an afterthought." Where others saw routine inconvenience, Plank saw an opportunity hidden in plain sight. If the shirt could change, the entire athlete could change with it. But opportunity alone wouldn't solve the problem. Fabric technology wasn't something he knew much about. The science of moisture-wicking textiles belonged to niche outdoor gear, not mainstream sports. Still, Plank had an instinct, a conviction, that the solution wasn't cotton at all. It was something synthetic, something engineered, something that didn't absorb sweat but managed it. The seed of Under Armour had been planted quietly in the locker room of a young athlete who refused to let irritation pass without a solution. The search for the perfect fabric. While most college seniors polished resumes and prepared for job interviews, Kevin Plank spent his final year wandering cavernous fabric warehouses. He drove up and down the East Coast, stepping over tangled rolls of nylon, polyester, and spandex, materials used for everything from swimsuits to industrial uniforms. He didn't understand the terminology yet, and he had no real sense of which suppliers were reputable. But he did understand the experience he wanted an athlete to feel. A shirt so light it barely registered on the skin, one that stayed dry through the worst August heat, one that didn't turn into a heavy, dripping curtain the moment sweat hit it. Plank became a student of fabric science by necessity. He learned the difference between hydrophobic and hydrophilic fibers, how compression behaved against the body, and why some materials wickeded moisture while others trapped it. He stitched crude samples, wore them through drills, soaked them, washed them, and tested them again. Progress was slow, marked by a cycle of constant trial and predictable disappointment. The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. Plank discovered that synthetic microfibers, materials commonly used in women's lingerie, offered precisely the breathability and fast-drying properties he had been searching for. The garment that would revolutionize football performance didn't emerge from the world of sports at all. It came from a fabric engineered for an entirely different purpose. He purchased yards of the material, hauled them back to Maryland, and transformed the floor of his grandmother's Georgetown townhouse into a makeshift design studio. Local seamstresses helped him turn rough sketches into functional prototypes. Those first wear testers weren't paying customers but teammates who delivered honest feedback without hesitation. Some shirts clung too tightly, others felt flimsy. Some caused chafing, others failed to wick moisture as promised. Each complaint sent Plank back to the cutting table. Eventually, one version finally worked. Players emerged from practice wearing shirts that stayed light, dry, and close-fitting from the first whistle to the last. It didn't balloon with sweat or weigh them down. It moved with them, not against them. That was the moment Plank realized he wasn't just improving apparel. He had reimagined it. The first Under Armour shirt wasn't born in a laboratory. It was forged through persistence, sweat, and the relentless expectations of athletes unwilling to settle for anything less than performance. Plank hadn't simply invented a better t-shirt, he had created the blueprint for the modern base layer, launching a company out of a car trunk. Once the prototype was ready, Plank transitioned from inventor to salesman almost overnight. He loaded boxes of shirts into the trunk of his Ford Taurus and drove from campus to campus, visiting friends who played at major football programs. His sales pitch was simple and disarmingly confident. Try it. If you don't like it, don't pay me. Most athletes not only paid, they asked for more. Players loved the shirts because they solved a problem they had accepted for years as unavoidable. Equipment managers appreciated the sudden lack of complaints about sweat-soaked gear. Coaches noticed their athletes moving with less fatigue and greater comfort. Word traveled quickly through locker rooms and athletic departments. Plank converted his grandmother's basement into his first headquarters, crowding every inch of space with boxes, sewing samples, shipping materials, and hand-scribbled invoices. From that cramped room, he spent hours calling equipment managers across the country, promoting the single product he believed could change the way athletes dressed. His conviction, paired with the growing buzz among players, began to pay off. Then came the real breakthrough. The first official orders from Georgia Tech, Arizona State, and NC State. With those purchase orders, Plank was no longer just a former football player with a clever fabric idea. He was a legitimate supplier for some of the nation's most respected athletic programs. The company name, Under Armour, didn't come from branding mythology, but rather from practicality. Under Armour had a toll-free number Plank liked the ring of, and he simply adjusted the spelling. The original logo was scrawled by hand, imperfect, but iconic enough to endure. Every part of the business remained hands-on. Plank packed boxes himself. He wrote each invoice. He applied shipping labels, dropped off packages, and tracked orders manually. Growth came one phone call, one locker room, one equipment manager at a time. But with every shipment, the undercurrent strengthened. Under Armour was becoming something more than a curiosity. The world of sports was beginning to sense that a shift had started. One stitched together in a basement, sold from a car trunk, and powered by an athlete's refusal to tolerate an inferior shirt. The breakthrough that changed everything. In business, every rise has a moment, one decision, one opportunity, that shifts a company from obscurity to inevitability. For Under Armour, that moment arrived in the mid-1990s when the NFL's equipment managers took interest in Plank's shirts. NFL players wanted moisture-wicking garments for the brutal heat beneath their pads. Plank understood the need intimately. He sent samples to teams, and slowly, orders trickled in. But what accelerated Under Armour's rise wasn't isolated team sales, it was visibility. University teams wearing Under Armour made bowl games. NFL teams that adopted the shirts appeared on television. Slowly, subtly, the public, and the industry, began to notice the tight, sleek undershirts peeking out from beneath pads and jerseys. The idea that a company could build its entire identity around a single foundational garment seemed improbable. But Plank embraced it. Then came the watershed moment. The film, Any Given Sunday. When costume designers sought realistic athletic apparel, they reached out to Under Armour. Plank saw the opportunity instantly. He didn't just supply film gear. He personally drove samples to the set, ensuring the brand was worn by actors portraying elite athletes. This wasn't conventional advertising. It was storytelling, placing the product inside a narrative of power, speed, grit, and prestige. After the film release, Under Armour's visibility exploded. Coaches called, teams called, retailers called. Under Armour was suddenly not a novelty. It was a necessity, and Plank was ready to fill that need. Building a brand that athletes would bleed for. Kevin Plank understood something essential about athletes long before Under Armour became a household name. They didn't want clothing. They wanted identity. A great product mattered, of course, but the deeper craving was for a symbol that reflected the way they trained, pushed, and punished themselves for progress. So he set out to build Under Armour as more than fabric and stitching. It would become a declaration. Protect this house wasn't just an advertising line, it was a battle cry. It distilled the intensity of the locker room into a few words, a mentality built around defiance, discipline, and the promise that no opponent would outwork you. Nike celebrated triumph. Adidas leaned on nostalgia. Under Armour embraced the raw, unglamorous core of sport, the grind, the sweat, the willingness to suffer for inches. It captured the psychology of the athlete who thrives in discomfort. The response was immediate. Players felt represented. Coaches saw their team culture reflected in the message. Even high school athletes, many who had only seen the brand in magazines or on college sidelines, began begging for Under Armour gear because it made them feel tougher, sharper, hungrier. This was how the brand secured a place not just in the industry, but in the athletic psyche. Plank wasn't fabricating a persona. He was channeling his own experience as a player who had never been the fastest or most celebrated, but who lived off grit and sheer effort. Under Armour became the banner for those who trained like that. Athletes who believed identity is built in sweat, long before it is displayed in victory. The company wasn't just outfitting sports teams. It was giving them a reason to stand taller. But one player was standing tallest among them, Kevin Plank himself. The billion-dollar climb. Under Armour didn't coast after its early success. It accelerated with the controlled force of a sprinter coming out of the blocks. Once Plank proved that performance apparel could be engineered, the company began expanding into technologies that reshaped athletes' expectations. Moisture-wicking shorts arrived next, followed by full cold-weather base layers, designed to keep players warm without adding bulk. Heat gear, optimized for scorching temperatures, extended the brand's reach into summer sports. Compression gear refined how athletes supported their muscles. Then came footwear, then global retail, then the bold move into digital fitness platforms. Each leap forward deepened Under Armour's status as a company obsessed with performance science rather than fashion trends. Retailers scrambled to secure inventory. Professional athletes and elite trainers requested specialized pieces. Soon, Plank was no longer the entrepreneur handwriting labels in his grandmother's basement. He had become the CEO of one of America's fastest-growing brands. The company's 2005 IPO, coming on the heels of $281 million in net revenues for that year, confirmed everything its early believers sensed. Within 5 years, revenue exceeded $1 billion, then surged again to nearly $2 billion by 2012, and to almost $4 billion by 2015, a pace of growth few apparel startups match. As global retail and digital fitness platforms matured, Under Armour sustained its rise. By 2019, annual revenue topped $5.2 billion, and, despite economic headwinds, it remained at about $5.9 billion in 2023, and around $5.2 billion in 2025. The frustrated college fullback who once agonized over a soggy t-shirt had built a global empire, one that reshaped how athletes dressed from the skin outward. The challenge of success. Exponential success introduces new forms of pressure. As Under Armour raced into footwear, broadened its international presence, and pushed into categories ranging from high-performance gear to everyday lifestyle apparel, the complexity multiplied. Suddenly, the company wasn't simply competing with Nike's storytelling or Adidas's nostalgia. It was competing with decades of their innovation machinery. Supply chains grew more intricate. The brand had to stretch across sports, climates, cultures, and demographics, while still retaining the hard-edged identity that defined its early years. Consumers were shifting too. The rise of athleisure blurred the line between sport and streetwear, forcing Under Armour to ask whether its future lay in technical performance, fashion, or some merging of the two. Every move carried risk. Every expansion demanded new expertise. Through it all, Plank led with the instinctive boldness that had gotten him this far. Some strategic choices were praised as visionary, others drew criticism. But regardless of fluctuations, booms, setbacks, recoveries, one unshakable truth remained. Under Armour had permanently altered the landscape of athletic gear. Compression was no longer a fringe idea. Moisture-wicking fabric wasn't a novelty. Performance engineering had become an expectation, not a luxury. The modern understanding of athletic wear, from the locker room to the global retail floor, carried Under Armour's fingerprints. What began as one player's fight against a soaked t-shirt had become a worldwide transformation in how athletes prepare, train, and compete. The legacy of a problem well solved. Under Armour is often described as the classic story of an underdog challenging industry giants, but its origin is quieter, more human than that. It begins not with ambition or a grand plan, but with a moment of pure irritation, a soaked, heavy shirt clinging to a college athlete on a sweltering day. From that discomfort emerged a question that changed the course of sports apparel. Innovation rarely arrives as lightning. More often it comes from friction, the stubborn refusal to accept a flaw everyone else overlooks. Kevin Plank didn't set out to build a global empire. He set out to fix a small but maddening problem, one he knew every athlete had endured. The company, the IPO, the billion-dollar valuation, all of that came later. What mattered first was the shirt. And because the solution was so precise, so deeply rooted in the lived experience of athletes, it resonated instantly. Under Armour didn't grow by mimicking Nike or chasing trends. It rose because it solved a problem so universally felt that athletes recognized themselves in the product and recognized the brand as a reflection of their own pursuit of better. In that moment of connection, Under Armour found its power. Its ascent is a testament to the idea that transformation begins with close attention. One athlete paid attention to a problem that everyone else ignored and built an empire from the discomfort nobody else questioned. And as Kevin Plank said himself, this is something anyone can do. There's an entrepreneur right now, scared to death, making excuses, saying, it's not the right time just yet. But let me tell you this, there's no such thing as a good time. How many world-changing ideas are hidden inside the small frustrations we overlook? How many industries remain unchanged simply because no one has paused long enough to reconsider the most ordinary inconveniences? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Until next time.